As we start the new year, we start a brand new hype train for a ton of titles coming out in 2025. From RPGs to strategy games, there is something big planned for nearly every genre. 2024 seemed calm after a big year of releases in 2023, but the cycle is revving back up again. And in this video, I want to go through the most hyped games of 2025. Now, if this is your first time on my channel, the way I do things is by uploading the knowledge in my videos. While I don't want to spoil the list for those that want to experience it as I present it, you can find every single item or game that I'll be talking about in the chapters about the timeline in the description. And yes, GTA 6 is easily the most hyped game of the year. That's not really a spoiler, it's just a fact. But that's the entire list of games coming, so if you've seen everything on that list, then I want to be respectful of your time and not hold the information in my videos ransom. Please feel free to shut the video down and get back to waiting eagerly for each one of those launches. Before you head out, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe if you found this information in the video helpful. Each one of those things helps me out in a huge way. Lastly, you can find a link to my Twitch in the description below, where I'll be streaming these games and plenty more. Let's get started on my list of the most hyped games of 2025. First on our list is also one of the first games that's slated for this year in Monster Hunter Wilds. A return to the Monster Hunter scene brings us into a familiar gameplay loop that we had in Monster Hunter World, only this time Capcom has decided to blend in the elements of an open world style of RPG, eschewing the private lobby and quest queuing system of the previous title. This time around though, players get the ability to use two weapons at the same time, swapping them throughout an engagement to better socket into the needs of the fight. On that same note, you swap the weapon on the mount you start the game with. It's something brand new for the series, usually you don't start with it. Monster Hunter Wilds is set to release at the very end of February, and it will deliver the same punchy, over-the-top, dramatic, massive monster combat that we know and love in the series. Combining the elements of a semi-open world will allow players seamless transition between working alongside one another and crafting solo in town. And I'm not sure why I said allow like that, but I went ahead and said it. Wilds has 2 open betas in February as well planned, so if you didn't get a chance to play in the last open beta, you can get your hands on the game for free to see if you like it. It's worth noting, Capcom has released a massive hour-and-a-half long stream talking about the improvements they've made to the game since the last beta, but unfortunately those improvements won't be in the open beta coming, which is a weird move. You'll love Monster Hunter Wilds if you're looking to play a highly technical combat RPG where you focus on learning combos on your desired weapons to destroy some of the largest and most engaging monster fights in the industry right now. Switching gears to more of a Souls-like title, Wuchang Fallen Feathers takes place in the late Ming Dynasty, a particularly brutal time period in the late 17th century. The game explores tons of Chinese folklore, bringing things to life in a game that is somewhere in between Sekiro's overall feel and mechanics, but Bloodborne's horror aesthetic. While I think it's an easy comparison to make between this game and Sekiro, it feels like it will be more along the lines of a game like Nioh. Both Sekiro and Nioh share the same action RPG DNA, but Nioh takes things in the same direction Wuchang seems to be going. Now, we don't have a ton of details about the actual gameplay elements, but the trailers have been released so far show a lot of unique gameplay mechanics. Dual-wielding swords, wielding polearms, using bows, the possibility for builds looks about on par with a lot of the big hitters in this genre. You'll see in some of this footage the character using a lightning enhanced bow that can do a multi-shot attack. I don't know if that's going to be a specific elemental imbuement, if that's a bow type of thing, if it's a skill, whatever it is. Couple this with horrifying looking bosses that have some crunchy looking mechanics, and this could be a game that sucks hours of your life away. In addition, we have seen plenty of elemental magic gameplay for those that play their Soulsborne games as casters, so you'll have access to that throughout this entire title. Across the art direction, the unique time period, and the heavy-hitting combat style, this one has me very intrigued, as the Souls-like subgenre is now become one of my favorites, especially in the last 2 years with so many big titles that have come out. This game has been in development for a good chunk of years here though, showing off alpha gameplay some 3 years back, but it is slated for release later this year across PS5, Xbox, and PC. Assassin's Creed Shadows unfortunately just got pushed back to March, which is fine for me because that month that it was in was already packed. But Ubisoft's return to the AC franchise has been hotly anticipated. This time the team is going into feudal Japan in the later portions of the Sengoku Jidai, a time period that players have wanted since Assassin's Creed's earliest inception. This is the first major Assassin's Creed installment that we've had since 2020's Valhalla, Mirage being a smaller game that acts as a prequel to the aforementioned one that came out just last year. AC Shadows feels like a much needed step in a proper direction for the series, splitting the gameplay across two main protagonists. You'll play as either a samurai or a shinobi. Both characters' names I'm not even going to try to butcher in this video. In a lot of the newly released footage, we can see a total revamped stealth system that feels like a return to the slower paced roots of the first games. Personally, I love to see this, as I've always said that the AC series or Assassin's Creed series has departed so much from the way that they used to play to basically just being a straight up RPG in an open world. Being able to hide in the brush, lay in small koi ponds with a bamboo snorkel, army crawl through snow, all of it feels like a much more dedicated system versus Valhalla, which felt like you just stealthed to a point where you ended up brawling anyway. Assassin's Creed Shadows gets away with that by bifurcating the gameplay across the two characters that you freely swap between. The shinobi focuses on stealthy agility gameplay styles with takedowns, quick parries, and elusive gameplay, and the samurai is, well, you guessed it, it's far more front and personal. You can get in the thick of it with an improved combat system that looks, at first blush, a lot more fluid and less jankety. Playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey or Valhalla, the game would always devolve into high hit point battles throughout the many towns against, certain VIP characters. The combat system now looks like it will borrow more of the elements of Assassin's Creed 1 and 2, where the combat is geared more towards parrying, combos, and quick executions. We'll have to see what they look like as we get closer to launch, but I'm beyond excited to jump into another Assassin's Creed game through one of my favorite periods in history. Launch, of course, being delayed into March, but Assassin's Creed Shadows will be out in March 20th, 2025 across PS5, Xbox, and PC. Let's leave feudal Japan for a bit. Don't worry, we'll be going back to talk about some sci-fi goodness. Dune Awakening is Funcom's newest game to come out this year, borrowing heavily from the DNA of their popular survival game Conan Exiles, but this time on the planet Arrakis. Personally, I'm a huge survival game fan as well as a Dune fan, so I'm really into this title. It has a lot of quality of life things that I'm very excited for, but it's positioned as an MMO when that isn't necessarily correct. The game is split into a server cluster system. So you select a server to make a character on, and you're in a shielded location that is purely PvE. You can build your base, have fun with friends, do whatever you want. Then there's a shared social space in Harco Town, similar to what we get in No Man's Sky. Then there's a larger PvP-focused, weekly resetting shared server outside of the shields where you can raid spice harvesters, call dune worms down on people, all sorts of chaos. The size of the desert is several times larger than Conan Exiles map, so there should be plenty to explore and get involved in. It's something like 100 plus people are allowed on that map. It's huge. What's so awesome about Dune Awakening is that it allows you for just plenty of ways to build your character across range weapons, melee weapons, and also mentats, basically, to put it in layman's terms, the quote-unquote psychic abilities of the universe if you're not familiar with Dune. And there's more to that explanation, but still. When it comes to building your base, you can erect an outline while your friends go and build each one of the individual blueprints that you've placed. But you can also save the entire base that you've built as its own blueprint. This allows you to quickly move your base around, build it in the desert, or even sell the blueprint to people. So if you're not particularly crafty with base construction, you can simply buy a blueprint on the market that other people have made. You'll also be able to build out your own ornithopter however you see fit as well. The game will be punishing though, in all areas outside of the shielded one, meaning you'll lose all gear if you die. Going out into the desert isn't a requirement at all, and there are plenty of things to do for those that don't want to join a guild, allowing you to steal from people by raiding their spice harvesters, all sorts of tricksy tricks if you want to play solo than versus with just playing with a bunch of people. The game revolves around the conflict between the Harkonnen and Atreides, which are both factions you can join. And as far as the Fremen go, that's locked to a particular story arc somewhere in the world. We don't really know yet. You discover skills in this game by learning from a mentor, and the Fremen skills are attached to that kind of same system. But Dune Awakening is slated for an early 2025 launch on PC with a later console release date. Fans of the game Black Desert Online will be excited to hear about Crimson Desert's release sometime this year. The game has gone through a lot of rebranding though. Positioned originally as an MMO, then as a Zelda style of RPG game, all sorts of stuff, but now it has solidified into something akin to a Witcher style of RPG, with a challenging reaction-based combat system. You play as a Scottish gentleman named Cliff, which I guess is a Scottish name, exploring the world of Crimson Desert, which is a world that is somewhere between a high fantasy and a realistic Middle Ages aesthetic. fans of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 that are looking for something a little bit more fantastical should feel right at home here. The visual direction of the game is absolutely stunning. From rich green grasslands to snowy mountaintops, you'll be taking part in a very open and very alive world. Traversing the landscape is easily done as you sprout crow wings and glide all over the place. No doubt filled with all sorts of parasites, because that's what birds are filled with. But combat looks very hectic, without a dedicated lock-on system, but also pleasing in the way that you can cut through swaths of goblins with over-the-top animations. Things also look to be heavily reaction-based, with quick-time events and perfectly timed parries that have flourishing rewards in the form of big damage numbers. Boss battles also look to be less on the Dark Souls level of scale and more on the faster-paced tight combos of some other action RPGs out there. The game as a whole gears more towards quick movement over slower measured ones. Build diversity and what the RPG system is like has yet to be fully showed off, but I'm excited to see what this game brings, even as a more linear looking story and less of a sandbox RPG. I mean, personally, I get overwhelmed at the ever increasing sandbox RPG amount. I just ain't got that kind of time anymore. But Crimson Desert is slated for release sometime this year across PC, PS5, and Xbox. Returning to Japan, the recently announced Ghost of Yotei looks to enhance the already amazing experience of Ghost of Tsushima. Set 300 years in the future, during the Edo period in the region of modern-day Hokkaido, you play as Atsu around the famed Mount Yotei. Fans of Ghost of Tsushima should feel right at home with the combat system of Yotei, but initial talks have discussed an improved system all the way through, allowing for more fluid and steady combat. And this is awesome to hear, as the game was already pretty damn fluid. As a PS5 exclusive, it'll also leverage more of the PS5's hardware, as Tsushima's one of the final PS4 releases before the next gen launch. I'm hoping this means less load times, lower texture popping, and more. One of the biggest differences between the two games is the fact that Yotei will be delving deeper into Japanese folklore, taking on possible supernatural elements with either the story or gameplay mechanics. We don't have a ton of details on what new stuff is coming to the game, but we know that we'll be getting an expanded armory of weapons, with polearms being showcased in the initial announcement. Sucker Punch has also stated that they want a heavier focus on stealth with Atsu, which will lead to a revamp of that system as well. This would invariably lead to an expansion upon the ghost abilities that Jin used in the first game, but hopefully going in a different or deeper direction. Personally, I went on more of a heavy melee route, focusing on more of a pure samurai style of character in the first game, but I'm wondering what that looks like for Atsu and Yotei, as the game feels like less of an emphasis on not just that style of character, but that narrative as well. Ghost of Yotei has a release of 2025 as a PS5 exclusive, which will probably be ported to PC a few years later. I'd expect a late summer or early fall release for this one, matching its predecessor's August launch. Now, we haven't had a Battlefield come out since 2021, a series that used to be a yearly tradition, bucked by their last two entries, which have been 3 years apart. Battlefield 6, or whatever the title will be a return to form for the series, a soft reset that is desperately needed after the train wreck that was Battlefield 2042's launch. By the way, if you haven't played 2042 since launch, the game is in a great place now, and they've done away with most of the crap that muddied its launch. This trailers that you're watching right now, they're from that game, in case you were wondering. On that note, the specialists of 2042 are now gone in 6, returning to the series' token class system, and the setting brings us away from the past and a near future in lieu of a modern warfare setting. Also, there won't be any 124 player maps, reducing things for a much tighter and engaging gameplay style. The game is reported to be set around 2027, using modern warfare to convey the conflict between a massive private military force and NATO in destinations all over the globe. We don't have any concrete details yet, but most of what we know comes from insider interviews, giving us at least a taste of what's to come for the series' 18th installment, which I was surprised to remember that there's been 18 of them, and I feel older than time. Fans of the series can expect fully destructible environments, vehicles, the whole works, but across a number of different ways to experience the Battlefield game. What's interesting here is that DICE will be heading up the development of Battlefield 6, but it has broken apart its development across multiple studios to help enhance the process. DICE is in charge of the multiplayer. Motive, the team behind Star Wars Battlefront 2, is doing the single-player campaign. Criterion, the Need for Speed folk, are working on the content and experiences, quote-unquote, side of things. Not sure if that means DLC or what. Lastly, Ripple Effect is working on a brand new Battlefield experience in their words, which is heavily rumored to be either a battle royale or an extraction shooter mode for the game. And it wouldn't surprise me if it was just like both, right? If you had a way to toggle it. Personally, I've always been a Battlefield fan, so I'm excited to see a full-fledged return to a formula that has worked for the series for ages. I'd love for this to be a Bad Company 3 entry, but there's been no conclusive evidence of whether or not that's the case. Battlefield 6 is due out later this year, likely in October, with a community beta test sometime in early 2025. We're in the top 3 now, and one of my favorite series of all time is finally coming back with the new Fable game due out this year. And I think I've said almost everything on this list is one of my favorite series, but I swear to God, I got a lot of good series, okay? The first teaser came out in 2020, showcasing a fairy and not much else. And since then, we still haven't received a ton of details about the game, but a trailer in 2024 set the game's release window as sometime this year. Again, most details are scant at this point, but the game is stepping back into a setting reminiscent of the fantastical medieval world of Fable 1. Rather than the Victorian or steampunk approaches that the latter games took with the advent of things like gunpowder. Early gameplay footage shows spells intermixed with bow attacks, devastating swordplay, and other fun mechanics. From some interviews in the game, there has been a heavy influence of Witcher in the overall feel of the game. Even the most recent trailer almost looks like a brighter, sunnier Witcher when the protagonist is walking through the town through to other characters. In Fable, the protagonist is rumored to be under the tutelage of a former great hero that is sort of a kind of has-been style of character whose jaded prose are the theme of the recent trailers. My hope is that we get the same fluid character progression system from Game 1, allowing us to be any kind of character we want as long as we invest the points into the necessary skills. Battle mage, combat archer, two-handed axe-wielding madman, whatever your heart desires. And another thing I'm very curious to see how they'll be implementing is the morality system. A trademark of other Lionhead Studios, the former developers of Fable, has been a morality system where the character sprouts horns if they're evil or gains an angelic glow if they're altruistic. Dropping this system would be a huge miss in my opinion, as it was, again, one of the biggest features of this series. So I'm really curious to see what they're going to be doing with it. Fable is being developed by Playground Games, the same people who make the Forza series, which is already a fantastic set of games. So I'm hoping that level of polish goes into Fable 4, but it's also a real wild card at the same time. Fable 4 is an Xbox exclusive that will be launched on PC as well sometime in 2025. Moving into our second to last spot, Doom: The Dark Ages is my personal most hyped game of 2025. I know that everyone is stoked on GTA 6, and I have no doubt it'll be awesome, but I'm a huge fan of the Doomslayer, and he's coming back in a big way in the next installment. id Software has made some massive leaps from Doom 2016 to Doom Eternal, creating a high-octane, action-packed game that has you leaping onto platforms, shooting things in the face, sliding across the map, and double jumping into another thing to chainsaw in half. Truly, it is a terrifying ballet of pure air guitar melting destruction, soundtrack included. The Dark Ages, though, is looking to switch up the pace of the other games. While the last two games have had a lot of verticality, Dark Ages is going to go for more of a horizontal gameplay, something more akin to the boomer shooter lifeblood of Doom's legacy, having you dodge and weave through attacks versus heroically leaping all over the place. The pacing will then invariably slow down for players. This does not mean that the game will be easy, nay, but it would be more of a grounded playstyle, which is absolutely not a pun. Dropping the leaping around leaves the skill floor at a lot lower, while raising the skill ceiling a lot higher for the higher difficulties. The vibe of the game, too, has moved away from the arcade style of Doom Eternal and more towards the horror vibes of, the earlier Doom entries, giving us dark forests to pick our way through, crawling through deep dungeons and delving into abandoned castles. The high gothic horror feel of the Dark Ages is a return to the form for people that originally played Doom as a part FPS and part horror experience. That's right, if you didn't know, like OG Doom was a scary game for people, myself included, because I was like 6 when I played it. With all the new weapons teased, there will still be plenty of ways to bring the Doomslayer's justice to demonic foes. A shield with chainsaw teeth that you can throw like a freakish parody of Captain America, a gun that chews up skulls and spits out fragments, and the old faithful shotgun are all some of the guns previewed in the trailers. Doom: The Dark Ages is set to come out sometime in 2025, and although owned by id, who is owned by ZeniMax, who is then owned by Microsoft, Doom will not be a Microsoft exclusive, so it'll be available on PC, Xbox, and PS5. Last but certainly not least is Grand Theft Auto 6, and unfortunately it's also the most enigmatic item on this list. Now, I think if you're a gamer that plays most of the things on this list, It is probably not the most hyped game of the year for you, but from a pop culture standpoint, I think few games have matched the hype of this title. Set in my favorite city of the entire series, we'll be returning to Vice City. Unfortunately, it's not set in 1986 anymore, and the game will be set in the modern era. You know, it'd be cool if it was actually set in 2026 as sort of a 40 years later type of narrative, but there's a chance that this game does come out in 2026, as the lead of Rockstar has said that they won't know if the game's getting pushed back into the new year until May. So there's, no competition or no rush, so Rockstar's not really concerned about it. They know that this will be their flagship game for the next 10 years, so they'll want it to be perfect out of the gate. Well, as perfect as a game like this can be once it gets in the hands of millions who discover way more bugs than QA can ever catch. With the game's single player, we can expect a robust rollout of multiplayer as well that builds off of the incredible GTA 5 multiplayer experience that has only gotten better with age. Heists and a plethora of other things to do have all been witnessed across all sorts of gaming highlight channels for the previous games online, and we can expect the same if not more in GTA 6. The last note here is that while the trailer does show off a lot of Vice City, it also shows off a lot of the state of Leonida. Leonida. God, which is GTA's version of Florida. Oh man. So I'm excited to see what Rockstar's take on the places like Orlando, Key West, Disney World, and all other standout locations of Florida might be like represented in GTA 6, slated for release across all platforms later this year. And at that, it brings our video here to a close. And there's still even more titles to talk about. Avowed, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, The First Berserker Kazan, Civilization 7, the list goes on. 2024 was a quiet year for, major genre-defining title launches, but I think 2025 will be an absolute mammoth of a year with or without GTA 6. So go ahead and let me know what games you're really excited for in the comments below. Does anything on this list pique your interest? Or are there indie titles that I didn't talk about? Let the people know what games you're excited about so they can share in your hype as well. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.